welcome to another episode of Monster Thoughts TV. Today we are going to be discussing the Onyro, I'm probably saying it wrong, the Japanese vengeful spirit with the lovely indie rainbow fish. She is a Twitch horror streamer, the co-founder of The Haunted House, a Discord for lovers of horror, and has started her own makeup line called Wishbone Cosmetics. Yeah, and we're going to talk about this vengeful ghost. If you have never been here before, we just talk about monsters with people that love monsters. I invite anyone to sign up. The sign-up link is on my Discord and on Twitter and various places. You can also DM me and ask me for the application. So we're just gonna get right into it. Hi, Indie Rainbow Fish. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me.
No problem.
Excited to be here.
Yes. Okay, so jumping right in, how did you come across, and I know we talked about it briefly before, but like, how do you say it again? Because there's an R.
I believe.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I've heard 3 different pronunciations, but I believe the most common one is Onyo.
Onyo.
So I spell Onyro, but I don't think you put R. So it's like Onyo. I've also heard on you as well, but Onyo seems to be the most common.
We're gonna go with Onyo for the sake of the interview. Just going forward. Okay. So first question: how did you come across the Onyo? I'm probably gonna mess it up. Onyo is how we're pronouncing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I first came across it basically was actually through film, and I didn't realize what Onyro was at the time, but I actually first found it when watching or being told about the Grudge and the Ring films. The monsters, so to speak, in those movies are Onyos, and I had no idea what it was. I knew it was something to do with a Japanese spirit in some way, but I didn't know what it was. All I knew is that it was a very terrifying design, and the idea of a spirit that just can't be killed and is just constantly coming after you was enough to terrify me, but also keep me interested for a very long time.
And it's a spirit of vengeance, right? Like that's a definition? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Onyos are Yurei, which is a Japanese spirit, and what makes them different from other spirits is that, like you said, they're vengeful. They've often been killed in really unjust ways, so they seek vengeance on, though it can be a location thing, like in the movie Grudge and the Ring, it's triggered by either watching something or being in the house of where the person. Sometimes they can cause storms and stuff like that, depending if you go back to and stuff like that, where you first start seeing the spirit. They can come in any form, but it's always linked to vengeance.
Okay, so they can be like a dog of vengeance, or a man who wants to get vengeance, or a woman, kind of?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed over the years. So originally, Onyos weren't strictly a particular form. However, because of kabuki theater, which is a Japanese type of performance, usually mime or dance, they represented Onyos as spirits, which were typically, even though kabuki is performed by men, Onyos would particularly be portrayed as women with long, unkempt black hair, usually wearing a white kimono and painted white skin. So that's kind of what we associate Onyos to be today. But if you go back to like the original concept, it can come in any form.
Okay, so someone just mentioned the Grudge was an Onyo. And now I'm thinking, like, the Ring, like, would those be considered?
So the Ring is considered Onyo. So what I found, there is some disagreement whether the Grudge is Onyo and whether it's a different kind of spirit because it's an earthbound spirit. I've heard people say that it is, and again, I am not from Japan, so I'm not gonna claim if someone from Japan or possibly who has studied Japanese spirits and history and art knows better than me, that's absolutely fine. Through what I've studied in media and everything, the Grudge is genuinely considered to be Onyo because Kayako, which is the name of the character from the Grudge, she was a spirit killed unjustly and is vengeful due to the way she was killed. Does not come under the definition. But yeah, I understand why that person would disagree. But the Ring definitely would be considered Onyo.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. So we explained that Onyo was a vengeful spirit. So what is scary about them for you? Like, can you go a bit more in depth with that?
For me, and again, my conception of Onyo is kind of the representation of it in the last 20 or 30 so years, from the 90s so forth, from Japanese horror. The thing about them being vengeful spirits is this unyielding force that will just constantly come after you. It's not a thing of Onyos aren't all about the blood and the gore. It's just a force and a spirit that will just always be looking for you, and it will never stop. You can't fight it. It's not something you can fight. It's just you can try and run from it, but ultimately will get you. Also, with its recent representation, if we consider the Grudge, Kayako, or the Ring, the girl from the Ring, there's an element of the uncanny valley with them, because they're kind of they're human like, because they spirits, they look like humans. However, the way they walk in film, in media, is represented in a very kind of kabuki theater inspired way, so the movements often a little bit off. Their faces can sometimes be distorted, so they look human enough that we recognize them as human, but not quite human enough that it makes us kind of feel that uncomfy feeling when you see something that's uncanny. For me, that's something that's really scary. And also, just I don't know what it is, but maybe it was because I was introduced to Onyo at such a young age. It was something that my sister kind of introduced me to as a way to scare me.
Yeah.
I was about 11 at the time, I think. Maybe that is why it holds such fear in my...
I think so. That'd make a lot of sense. Yeah. Vampires scare me.
A bit of trauma there.
Yeah, I found vampires when I was younger too, so that's definitely why I'm obsessed now. What's your favorite depiction of an Onyo or a Yuri? Which is a Japanese monster.
It would be The Ring, I think, just because it was my first introduction to it. It's also the simplest and most well done way of it. It's just a very, very simple look and design. Tall girl with long dark hair, with the ability to go from moving very slow to very fast, and the pale skin and everything. I think since then, a lot of video games, horror movies have kind of tried to take that concept that, girl, dark hair, white sheet, blah, 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 and kind of remodel that. But they were that was the kind of first introduction to it. And I think it's the most well done. And it doesn't, the first Ring film, and I'm referring to the Japanese film,
original,
the way they do, the original. The way they do it, they don't overdo it. Probably quite tame compared to horror that we see nowadays, but it's just enough to scare you, but not so much that it's silly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What movie or TV show or book would you recommend to anyone that wants to check out these vengeful spirits? So we know you said The Ring, or the original.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because again with Onyo, Onyo is the Japanese spirit, and there are other examples of Onyo that are very similar but aren't strictly Onyo, maybe because they're not from Japan. They're from, for example, don't know if you've seen the film Shutter.
Yes. With the camera.
Spirit in that, it's very similar to Onyo. It's a Thai movie. Originally, it's not strictly Onyo. Like, for example, there's some Western iterations of types of Onyo. In the Evil Within game, the second one, there's a type of Onyo spirit character, but it doesn't technically count as... It's a difficult one, because there are some things that go, oh, that's an Onyo spirit, but it doesn't technically count. So yeah, I mentioned The Ring. I would recommend the original Grudge films as well, with Kayako and Toshio, who are the spirits in there. Again, perhaps not strictly Onyo, but what I would believe close enough in definition, I would recommend it. Shutter as well, if you haven't seen it, the original, the Thai version as well. Again, the Thai film, not Japanese, but again, it comes under the kind of definition. And yeah, there's some video games that kind of have that kind of concept in there. Evil Within has this kind of take on it as well. It's a trope that you'll probably see done quite a lot in horror games as well, because it's quite a simple design. It's quite easy to maneuver, just having a creepy kind of vengeful spirit.
Yeah,
Ring and Grudge, I would say, would be to start you off, to get you an idea, and then there's some more kind of lesser known ones that you can get.
Okay, so this is a question I didn't pose to you earlier, or I didn't give you before this, but I'm just curious now that we're talking about it. How do you feel about non-American horror movies in general? Do you think they're better than American horror movies?
I would wager yes. My favorite horror movie of all time is Wreck, which is not an American movie. There was the remake, which was Quarantine.
Okay.
Yeah. I would if you have seen Quarantine but you haven't seen Rec, I would recommend seeing it. Rec's no, I can't remember if it's Spanish or Italian. Someone would have to correct me on that, but it's brilliant. For me, it's one of the best horror films made. There's some, and also if Japanese horror is something. It's very much its own entity, and for me, it's kind of the American kind of approach to horror. I feel like is very different from the rest of the world, is
Yeah.
because there's kind of a, I don't know what it is, but it always seems like there's kind of there's got to be like a hero in there, where like there's got to be like this kind of element of you got to fight back in some way, whether they're successful or not depends on the film.
Yeah.
But there's a kind of you got to fight against it. In the rest of the world, there's no fighting against it. It's like you're gonna lose. Particularly if you're looking at something like The Ring, it's like you can't fight this spirit. The spirit will get to you eventually. And Wreck as well, even though it's technically a zombie movie, I guess. We've seen lots and lots of zombie movies done around the world. There's a sense of hopelessness to it, which makes it like excellent horror and just that extra bit scary, because they're like, no one's getting out, there's no chance. Whereas I feel like, I don't know, I think it's kind of more ingrained in American Hollywood kind of culture, this kind of there's got to be like some sort of hero, or at least someone's got to at one point got to try and stand up to the monster or the killer or whatever.
Yeah.
But we're seeing that change. I mean, American horror is definitely on, like, we're seeing a switch from like what American horror is particularly and what's represented.
We are?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, personally, one of my favorite horror films that came out in the last few years was Get Out. And, I feel like America has a really interesting way. I mean, there's a lot of, there's a real social context with America that's really interesting to showcase through horror. And with Get Out, that was, racism basically being shown. Which is something that I can't imagine anyone in the UK doing something like that, or perhaps in the rest. I feel like America there is an interesting perspective in horror that I am seeing. As an overall, maybe not so much, but like there is something there. I just feel like horror, particularly in Japan, Thailand as well, Southern Korea as well, there's this sense of hopelessness in their horror, which is just really difficult to emulate. And if you look at a lot of remakes of Asian horror films in particular, they just there's something missing, and I can't always pinpoint it, if it's the hopelessness or a kind of like happiness edge that's put into the remakes. I'm not sure. I just think Japanese horror in particular just have this edge, and this kind of this real insight into what scares the human mind. That, like, they've really just nailed it on the head. If you want to watch something that's genuinely going to mess with you and scare you in terms of horror, absolutely recommend Japanese horror. Just go if you have Shutter, go on Shutter. There's loads on there, or just do a quick Google.
Yeah. So switching gears for a second, have you ever seen I'm gonna say it wrong, La Llorona?
No, I haven't.
You haven't? Okay, so like, as I understand it, that is a Spanish or Latin American or some kind of legend where there's a woman who drowns. I think she takes kids or drowns kids in a lake. I'm probably butchering it. Let me know if I am. But as you're talking about like non-American horror movies, I was thinking about that because me and my husband recently watched La Llorona. Like, there's two versions of it on Amazon Prime and on Shudder. We watched the bad one, of course, but when you said that there was a glimmer, there was a story of like hope for the American version, I definitely picked that up in that movie, because at the end, of course, they realized that the spirit, she wants a necklace or I don't know. It was just so like, if she's trying to take your kids or something, like, I don't know, man. Like, figure out a way to like, like, I don't know. So yeah, it was like they gave her the necklace and they talked to the spirit at the end, and it was like there was like wind going around the attic and stuff, and that was how they conquered the spirit or whatever the case is. But they always imply that the spirit's not really dead type thing. That just made me think of how America just does not know how to I don't want to say not know how to tell a horror story, but I feel like they make things too palatable for us, for Americans, really. Like, I feel like we can take it. Someone saying the story
Yeah.
has a young woman that drowned her kids and herself after a noble wouldn't marry her. The kids belong to the noble. I was part of a play in high school about it. Okay, thank you for that. So we have some context for her. She wanted kids, so I guess it was a vengeance thing as well.
Add on to what you said, in terms of, in America, they definitely, I feel like over in the US of A, they in horror movies, there's a need, and I think it's very much a Hollywood thing. There's a need for an explanation, and I feel that's quite patronizing to American audiences, that you need to 100% understand the reasoning behind the monster. And I feel like that you don't always need a reason for something to be scary, or a reason for like it can be interesting, but sometimes something's just dangerous and scary because it's dangerous and scary. Or you don't need to have all the answers to. In fact, if anything, you want the less you know, the more scary it is. It's the whole "why are you doing this" trope. That makes it scary. I feel like Hollywood just needs to chill on the kind of, we need an explanation, we need to know why the monster's doing this, how can we possibly stop it, we need to have a twist at the end. It's almost like a formula that you can just see happening. And with the thing about makes horror scary is the surprise and the element of the unknown. So I think Hollywood just needs to relax on an answer and a reason for why everything is the way it is.
I agree, but then with that, sometimes I feel like you get those stories or movies that don't really tell you anything, and you're really lost. Because I watch a ton of horror movies, and I've seen more than my share of it's open-ended, but by leaving it open-ended, I have no idea what I just spent an hour and 20 minutes watching. So I really would have appreciated not a tie-up, but like just some sort of kind of just an explanation for what the just happened, because I don't even know. So I feel like the open-ended thing can be used as a cop-out. Can you tell us a bit about Onyro, and you may know about that we haven't discussed today?
I was thinking about this question because I was like, what can I say that I haven't, already? So one thing that's good to look into is Onyro, and I really wish I looked up some examples, but there's some good examples of short films available on YouTube which are done really well. And also there's some clips from I mentioned Kabuki Theatre earlier, that kind of have stories that are Onyro based and stuff like that. My general thing is to look into like short films. There's some really good horror short films available on YouTube. I think there's some available on Shutter as well. But yeah, I think in terms of Onyro, I covered everything.
I'm so glad you decided to like join us. If you want to tell everyone really quick where they can find you on social media, please be my guest.
Love to. Thank you. So yes, I am also a Twitch streamer. You can find me on Twitch, which at indie_rainbowfish. Also, you can find me on Twitter, which is at rainbow_indie. Also, I do have my own cosmetics company, which I'm literally starting from scratch, called Wishbone Cosmetics. We also have a Twitter, which is at Wishbone Cosmetics. But also we are doing an Indiegogo campaign fundraiser. If you want to find out more information about that, just go to indiegogo.com /Wishbone Cosmetics, I believe. But yeah, you don't feel like you have to donate. You can just, check it out. Maybe consider sharing the link. It'll be much appreciated.
Oh, that's dope.
One thing I will add with the makeup is that it is horror inspired and very much by dark glamour as well. And it's intended to be for all genders and all skin tones, and it's also going to be vegan and also as eco-friendly as possible.
Yes.
So yeah, horror and dark glamour with the initiative to be for everyone in an eco-friendly group.
Yay, that's so freaking cool. You guys are doing big things. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I'll see you guys for the next episode. Bye.